Episode 14, Cineboys to Cinemen.
Hello.
Hi there. Hope you're well, wherever you are, whatever you're doing. This week it is...
The title of that.
The film, what's the film?
One Fine Morning.
One Fine Morning, yes. One Fine Morning.
It's a really difficult title to remember, I don't know why.
It's weird, like with a lot of... And this is in no way a detriment to any of Mia Hansen Love's films, because I've been sort of getting into them quite a lot after watching One Fine Morning, but... Like, they all have titles that are quite forgettable.
Yeah.
And I don't know why that is. Again, no reflection of her work at all, because it's so far fantastic. As is the film to which we will discuss. One Fine Morning. Said 3 times at the opening already.
Yeah.
A really fascinating and deeply sort of moving experience. I think.
Yeah, definitely.
Trite to say that, but and I'm going to go even triter and say that it actually kept me up quite a lot on the night of watching it, because again we saw it together.
Yes, we did. Yes. Very good. Very quite not upsetting, but very rousing, emotionally rousing, I guess you could say. Yeah.
It sort of addresses a lot of the questions that dog a lot of our lives, I think, in a very sort of subdued and sort of sentimental way. Yeah. Which left quite an impact on me. As the film focuses on life, love, death and human messiness, we felt it best to explore films that deal with similar themes and ideas. Yeah. Perhaps more explicitly or overtly than One Fine Morning, as it sort of deals with all of those. Yeah. But, we're going to give you the deep insight that you've come to know from Cineboys to Cinemen.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Lovely. Cinema and boys. At what age do you stop being a boy?
I think it depends... Depends on what sort of circle you're in, because as soon as you start work, like you could start working at 16, you're kind of a man then. But then in another context, at home, you're very much still a boy. So I don't know. Yeah.
When are boys? So there's no boys here. There's no boys.
There's no boys.
There's no boys here.
It would be I guess 18. I'm just going to go with the classic, the 18. As soon as you can legally buy a pint, you're a man. You're a man.
Put hair on your chest. Yeah. Pint of Boddingtons.
Yeah. Pint of bloody Cinzano.
Right.
Questing the cinematic void.
All right then. So, life, love, death, and human messiness. Me and Ben have picked a couple of films each.
Yeah.
And we're gonna fire them your way.
Indeed, yeah.
And you can start with the firing, big boy.
Oh, all right then. I wanted to talk about a film came out in 2017. Francis Lee directed it. He went on to do Amour, I think, with Kate Winslet and Saoirse Ronan. It was his debut. It's called God's Own Country.
Okay.
I think I've discussed it with you before.
Yes. Do you know, just beforehand, I actually haven't seen this film. So.
Yeah, no, cool.
It was on Netflix for a while, wasn't it? Is it still on Netflix?
I think it's in and out. It depends on the licensing and all that kind of stuff. But God's Own Country. It's primarily about this chap, Johnny, who works on his family farm in Yorkshire. Okay. He's sort of massively overworked due to his family, primarily his father, experiencing like a bit of a decline in health. So he sort of views this absolutely beautiful landscape. I mean, you kind of hail from that part of the world. So this is Yorkshire. I know you're sort of more kind of a Derby man, but so it's an incredible landscape. But he sort of sees it as something brutal and kind of unrelenting, a bit grueling because of the way he kind of works on the land. It's touched on, if I remember correctly, that his parents are not aware that he's homosexual. So that obviously sort of doesn't help their already strained relationship, because his work on this farm is just so kind of directionless that he sort of by default sort of resents his family, particularly his dad. Okay. He drinks heavily. His attitude towards sort of romantic relationships is pretty kind of hypersexualized. Okay. And then his family employ a Romanian farmhand, Gorge, and Johnny's sort of cold, unfriendly, kind of bitter demeanour starts to sort of crack slightly as he basically falls in love, or kind of his version of it anyway. He's still kind of the man that he always was, like very kind of straight talking, no nonsense type guy. But Gorge starts to sort of gradually transform his worldview into something much more positive, to sort of see the land he owns as sort of an asset, into something to be admired, admired for its visual splendour, and also the way it can sort of ultimately give back to you and provide you with like an honest living. So, although the film is primarily concerned with their relationship, there's a thread surrounding Johnny's dad as well, who's clearly inherited. Johnny sort of clearly inherited a lot of this bitterness, and he sort of inherited it from his dad. And then his dad has another stroke. He's had a stroke in the past, and he has another one. And then, so there's some very sort of tense but superbly crafted scenes that sort of surrounds the impending inheritance of this farm. You can see that whilst Gorge, who's only going to be around for one lambing season, is content with the work because it's temporary for him. You know, Johnny has no access to any kind of free-spirited nature, which is what sort of softened him to Gorge in the first place. And I don't know, I just think it's a really great narrative device. When done well, this kind of idea of like a blossoming romance with an inevitable end. You know, I'm thinking like Call Me By Your Name or like Before Sunrise. You know, the idea that these two lovers, there's definitely like a cut-off point which is looming, and I think that's when it can be done in a really dreadful way, but when done right, it really gets you emotionally invested in the film. So yeah, there's that narrative device there, but in God's Own Country, it's sort of interwoven with this like carry on, the family business, and by extension, the family legacy at the expense of your own happiness. That kind of theme going on.
Yeah.
And I thought, you know, it'd be interesting to bring it up in the context of One Fine Morning, which deals with the legacy of a sort of sick and dying relative also, perhaps in a much less sort of weather-beaten fashion. But, you know, the idea of the child carrying the burden of a loved one, the burden in this case sort of being a fast-fading like work ethic. I don't know, I always thought they were quite similar.
Sounds it. Yeah, that's really interesting.
Yeah, it's a really good film. Check it out. It's a bit. The poster makes it look a bit sort of BAFTA baity.
Yeah,
you know
I did remember thinking that.
Yeah,
it's strange. Yeah, it's again one of those films that you think, I want to watch that, and you just never find yourself watching it for whatever reason.
Yeah, I think the marketing material really doesn't help its cause.
Okay,
it just looks like a debut, but actually it's really impressive. I thought quite hard watch it at times, but quite emotional, but it's got a lot going for it, I thought. Good stuff. Yeah,
I really like that. It's a really interesting sort of analysis of the film. I particularly like the idea of love awakening a sense of optimism about the sort of lot you've been given.
Yes, yeah.
Ties in quite interestingly with the discussion around the beasts last week. We talked about this idea of the land, to my mind, looking beautiful. I mean, the Spanish rural landscape looked beautiful, but
incredible.
To its inhabitants who have inherited this hard, difficult, often very much forgotten and maligned way of life, is actually quite an oppressive landscape. So the idea that your view can be, you know, the way you superimpose your own sort of history and pressures and anxieties onto a landscape. And as a result can have really alter your relationship with something that can be quite special.
Yeah, I think so, yeah.
Which I think, I've not considered that, and it sort of makes me more interested to watch the film. I also like the idea of the burdensome nature of tradition and family.
Yes.
Which is I think you're right to sort of say in One Fine Morning it's present, but I don't think it's as oppressive as it sounds like it is in this film.
Oh, no way. No, it's a lot more... I think the relationship in One Fine Morning is, by and large, a lot more stable, and the only reason there's not a lot of optimism is because of unfortunate medical circumstances.
Yeah.
In this one, it's a lot more... The family itself is deeply rooted in tradition, as a lot of farming families naturally are.
Yeah.
And it just the way it portrays that's really fascinating, and the way it influences like his relationship over this, you know, blossoming romance, but you know, in the context of him and who he is and where he comes from, it's really difficult for him to reconcile the two. It's cool, man. There's a really great weird little scene in it where they both are just eating pasta. And it's really simple. Like Gorge just hands him some salt. He's like, "Put some salt on it; it'll taste nicer." And it's that just sort of encapsulates the whole theme of the film. It's like, you know, just flavour stuff up a little bit.
Yeah.
Yeah,
it doesn't have to be the same old shit necessarily.
Yeah, exactly.
But it's, you know, sometimes you need other people to point that out, and in some cases you might not even be able to stay.
Yes,
But I mean, in his case, he probably has to.
I think, I mean,
by the sounds of it, I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, it doesn't. give any sort of, I won't spoil anything, but it doesn't give any definitive answers in that respect. But there's an occurrence that happens at the end which it does sort of tie everything up in a nice little bow, which is unusual for an independent kind of first-time film. That I think there's, and we've talked about this in the past, an over-reliance on ambiguity, and it's not really present in this. That was a nice, like, pleasant surprise. Yeah. Give it a go, man. If you get a chance, it's good. It's a good movie.
Absolutely. You've encouraged me to bump it up the watch list.
Oh yes,
which is always a good thing.
Yeah.
I wanted to talk about, so I'm going to move slightly far away. We're still focusing around the idea of mortality or wrestling with one's mortality and having an impact on the way you perceive your relationships or perceive the world around you. I want to talk about Amour.
Oh right, yeah, okay.
Have you seen Amour?
Yeah, I have. Yeah, just the once.
yeah. It's Michael Haneke is often criticised as a filmmaker for having so much of a clinical view on things.
Oh yeah.
A lot of his films are sort of clinical experiments about the nature that audiences interact with violence and other unsettling imagery, and there's a distance to that which I can sort of understand why people would certainly think there's a sort of coldness to the way he approaches these themes and ideas. Yeah. He's a filmmaker that likes to manipulate his audiences, play with expectations, and make you as a film watcher feel like a piece of shit for indulging violence and other aspects of troubling, what he considers troubling in movies. But he's nonetheless, despite his caustic and sort of incendiary approach to filmmaking and the way he discusses films outside of that, is clearly a huge influence on many different filmmakers, and indeed, the creator of many great films. What sets Amour apart for me is there's a real sensitivity in this film, which I think separates it from his other films. I think there's a couple of films that definitely have that, but this is a real sort of upfront and, at least initially, a really sort of lovely presentation of an elderly couple's relationship.
Yeah, definitely.
But he doesn't shy away from the difficulty. And then obviously the central difficulty of the film being that his wife has a stroke. Yeah. So this old gentleman has now got to look after his wife and tend to her and try and sort of bring her out of the sort of, I guess, the post-stroke condition. I mean, I don't know, there's obviously a technical medical term that I'm not aware of, but for me, it's sort of like a story about the dedication needed to maintain long-term love. And the situation that befalls him almost strengthens that resolve to dedicate himself to her, as they have done. But now it's not just a mutual loving relationship now. Yeah. It's, she's in a situation where she needs him. She relies on him just for survival. Yeah. And that really pushes, I think, the ideas about relationships to their very limits. And it's incredibly sweet at points still, but it's a really devastating film, isn't it?
Oh, man, yeah. Really, he does siphon that kind of almost trademark grimness that you saw in things like Funny Games. That's a hard watch.
Benny's Video.
They're kind of really uncompromising. But yeah, you're right. Amour has a really nice, deft, sort of sweet touch. I'm not sure if it was personal, based on personal experience. Or maybe his parents or something. I'm not sure. I didn't do the research on that one.
No, me neither.
But you're right. It from what I remember of it, it's just got a nice touch to kind of illustrate why people continue to care for loved ones after, effectively there is no real hope for them recovering. And I think that's the general tone of the film, is like after a stroke of that age, the focus isn't going to be necessarily on recovery. It's just going to be maintenance of a quality of life. And I think that's all you can do. And the way that film kind of portrays that and how he grapples with that, what they said in their marriage vows, right? Like sickness and in health, this is the sickness part. Yeah. It's just, I do remember really finding that quite baffling in a Michael Haneke film. Yeah. Really good.
Yeah, great. I think it's the idea about the dedication that's needed, and I think what drives that dedication is how thankful he is to reflect on the sort of last 60, 70 years of their relationship. And that sort of drives his obviously human decency plays a part in that, but I think the idea that you've got to this point now where this is sort of an inevitability. You can't avoid these things happening to you at this point. At some point, death in its many forms will eventually come for you. And I think what drives his dedication to her is that sort of the life they've spent together is always in the back of his mind.
Yeah. The memories are what's doing it. It's not him looking forward to anything. It's him looking back, I guess.
And that's kind of like a sad thing as well, as it's sort of like as it is for sort of generating the sweet and tender moments in the movie. Yeah. It's quite sad as well that he's wrestling with the knowledge that, as you say, he's sort of maintaining this quality of life for her as best he can, knowing that he's never going to have that person back. So it's not an easy watch.
Christ, no.
Not because, as we said, Hanekei's typically sort of incendiary and difficult way that he constructs his films and the themes that he wrestles with usually, but just a difficult watch for the reasons mentioned already, the wrestling with mortality and something that we all have to address at some point in our lives, if not for ourselves and then the people we love.
I think what sets Amour apart from his other work is, like, with Funny Games, there's no happiness in Funny Games.
No, it is a fucking oof.
Yeah, it's just uncompromising,
stark and horrible.
Yeah, but
brilliant.
But
I
think in this one he still kind of takes the kind of grimness of it comes from a place of happiness.
Yeah,
and the fact that it might no longer be there, but at the same time, he's acknowledging that it was there at some point. It's just interesting. Maybe need to watch that again. Maybe not.
Definitely worth a go. Just you prepare yourself for an emotional assault.
Yeah, you have
to
be in
one
the
of
right
those
mood.
movies, and it does it brilliantly as well. Again, like you said with God's Own Country, there's plenty of potential for fuck ups in those kinds of movies. And obviously, someone like Haneke, you don't expect him to fall to type or to bow to the conventions of mainstream narrative devices, but. Even still, it's a lovely and deeply affecting movie that I would recommend anyone watch.
Definitely, yeah. Right, I will mention another film now, which I watched. It was like the 1 week where I got Mubi. It was like the week-long trial or something, and I got really into it, and then the tenner came out of my account. I was like, oh no, I think it was like the wrong month. But I managed to squeeze in a couple of films, one of them being Tony Erdmann, which you have seen, haven't you?
I have seen.
So, this one, I think it's German or Austrian?
I think it's German, isn't it?
Yeah. It's more about, and I think One Fine Morning touches on this as well, it's more about almost kind of unreciprocated, unconditional love from a parent to their child, I guess. So you have a career-focused main character, Inez, I think her name is, who's a sort of a BlackBerry-wielding, very focused, but very cold. Oddly similar to Johnny in God's Own Country, but without that kind of his destructive traits. And her predicament is kind of a web of her own making, I guess, that she's sort of stuck in. And as a result of this, she largely ignores her own father, or doesn't express any real sort of warmth or love towards him, at least not initially. And they've drifted apart, but one day he, all of a sudden, out of the blue, it seems, attempts reconciliation. And his behaviour is largely that of a pest, right? He exhibits a lot of sort of irritating traits, like playfulness at awkward or inconvenient times, that sort of thing. And as this behaviour sort of strains their relationship further, he infiltrates her life in a really weird kind of, like a weird disguise. Who's the titular Tony Erdmann. Known to his daughter and her colleagues, who he kind of gets to know as well in the guise of this almost sort of Mrs. Doubtfire style.
Oh, yes, it's coming back to me now. Yes, I remember. Does he have the fake teeth?
The glasses. It's like really shit, but people buy into it for some reason. It's got a very comical edge, this film. This one sort of ambushes you though, I think, because it's largely a comedy about like an unhinged man pestering his daughter, but I don't know, underneath I always thought it was hiding something really special and quite timeless about like the complex nature of the father-daughter relationship. You really get the sense that this woman's dad, who whilst his own life in general is a little bit grey and ordinary, I think he's like a retired music teacher or something and divorced, but you get the sense that he's really proud of her by the end. And it's almost the reverse of what happens in One Fine Morning in a sense, because in that film minor spoilers, and we'll talk about this more later on, but due to the sort of rather common but brutal circumstances, the relationship becomes less about love for love's sake and more about the love that centres around responsibility and care, again, like what you were saying with Amour. And it's sort of reciprocated less and less over time, as opposed to what happens in Tony Urban, which there's kind of they sort of meet in the middle at the end. It's really nice, warm, still a very bizarre moment. But really nice and quite warm, and again, it creeps up on you, that feeling, which is I just thought was worth a mention, that one.
It's quite disarming, isn't it? Because the tone of the film is sort of very bizarre.
Yes,
and you're right. I never thought about that sort of idea that he reverts to this sort of like playful, but it's infuriatingly playful nature. It's almost like he thinks, if I can just like win her over with a laugh, then I've done it.
Exactly.
Which I think is quite a common trait for people that are looking to reconnect, to try and use that sort of like you sort of have to earn that right to have those kind of jokes with each other, I think. Particularly with, after if you've been separate for a long time, and the idea you just walk in and do it,
crack a joke.
It does make for some brilliantly awkward and hilarious moments in the film. It's German-Austrian. I double checked.
Oh, right, okay.
There you go.
Yeah, nice.
You were right all along.
Oh, lovely.
Good film. Really like it, and it's been a while since I've thought about it. Again, I think I watched it on Mubi too, probably around the same time.
I caught a couple of films on Mubi. I think I watched 3 in all. One was like a Romanian werewolf film. One, I can't remember the title of this one. It was really good. It had a stag in it. I remember there was a stag in the snow, and large portions of the film were set in an abattoir. Unfortunately, that's all I can remember. That's kind of annoying because it was a really good film. I can't even remember the title. But man, Tony Erdmann, I think it should still be on Mubi. Give it a go. If you haven't already.
It's quite a long run time, but it's, I think, a film that earns it.
Yeah.
It really sort of gets under the skin of the ideas that you've just talked about with that runtime. I think the runtime complements this idea of all of the sort of awkward, misguided attempts for reconciliation. And the difficulties that he has in his life. And I remember feeling really sorry for him. Even though, like, he's someone that clearly, is no angel, and is obviously there's a reason why they've drifted apart. You just feel sorry for him because his attempts, despite being ridiculous, are genuine.
Yeah, exactly.
And you can't fault that, really.
No. But she finds fault in it initially, which
perhaps deservedly so. Yeah.
But she's also, like I said, she's a real workaholic, and she's got a lot of flaws as well. Which she refuses to acknowledge, and yet he kind of is, by attempting to reconcile with her, is kind of acknowledging his flaws. Maybe not all of them, but definitely mistakes he's made in his past. Although I think they're only ever touched upon. Yeah, I didn't think about the way that he uses humour to attempt to do that. I think we've all done that. Like, if we say something we thought, oh Christ, maybe I shouldn't have, you kind of laugh and attempt to sort of laugh it off and paper over the steaming pile of shit that you've kind of just created. Great little movie.
It's this sort of idea, isn't it, I think, and I think this film does it particularly well. When you're the sort of recipient of someone's anger and frustration, you crave nuance from that person. And when you're the person, the arbiter of that anger and frustration, you don't want that nuance, because if you give them that, then you're starting to accept them as human beings and accept that flaws are inherent within them. And the behaviours as a result of that flaws may be forgivable. If you're really angry and you find it really difficult to reconcile with that anger, then you don't want to do that. And I think the way the film plays with that is really interesting.
Definitely.
It's a really good choice, man. Like, it's one of those films that I really enjoyed at the time, but it sort of just left my mind completely. So talking about it's brought it back.
Nice.
It's nice to be reminded of it.
Cool.
But again, worth a go.
Yeah.
Don't be put off by the runtime.
No, don't actually. Yeah.
I'm going to go for something slightly different. I think this is a film that has a real... I mean, this is... I think this is quite a common thing for a film fan to say, but this is a film that really... It's just one of my absolute all-time favourites. Punch Drunk Love.
Oh, yeah.
I think the reason why... I mean, it seems like a bit of a stretch away from Mia Hansen Love and One Fine Morning and some other films, which I'll talk about a little bit later on, but I think what I love so much about Punch Drunk Love is this idea that love is deserved.
Yeah.
It's not sort of given to you by pity or chance.
Yeah.
You deserve to be loved, and everyone deserves to be loved. And it's a really trite thing when you say it in that in that context because you sort of frame it in the ideas of like really naff romance films.
Yeah.
But like Punch Drunk Love, what it does so well is it really sort of wallows in the mire of a particular individual's situation and circumstances.
Yeah.
Their sort of hopes and dreams, their failures and flaws, the difficult familial relationships, the loneliness, the inability to connect with anything. And just finding that love just drags him immediately out of the mire.
Yeah.
And sort of gives him the strength to deal with the difficulties that have sort of enveloped him his whole life.
Yeah.
The lead character, of course, is played by Adam Sandler, which was I think, a career-defining performance.
Oh man, yeah.
And made the whole world stand up and take notice of Adam Sandler as a phenomenal actor.
Yeah.
I mean, I still get angry when people don't acknowledge that.
Oh, yeah.
I genuinely, because I think you're the same as me and many people of our generation. We have such reverence for him for all the silly comedies, you know, the Happy Gilmores, the Waterboys, which I'll always hold dear in my heart.
Yeah.
But this is like the first film that really showed the world what he could do.
Yeah.
And interestingly, Paul Thomas Anderson knew that, and he almost constructs a character that is quite almost identical to these characters in his comedies.
Oh yeah.
All of these sort of, you know, the emotional vulnerability, the sort of and the behaviour as a result of that, you know, which typically is comically deployed.
Yes,
like the violent outbursts.
Oh man, yeah, completely.
But in this film, he gives it real emotional depth and emotional weight. Like the scene when he sort of trashes up the bathroom.
Oh my god!
You know, and then he smashes up the window after that discussion with his sisters.
With sisters, yeah.
Like that's not funny.
No, Christ.
They're not funny at all. It's really heartbreaking, and the way that Paul Thomas Anderson takes all of these tropes that I think all of us would have attributed to Adam Sandler before he came to this film or this role, and just dials them up to 11 in a way that really has, I don't know, there's something about his face as well. That just, But it's fascinating. I mean, and there's another aside. Was it Magnolia he'd just finished before Punch Drunk Love?
Yes, that was his previous film.
And on the press run for that, everyone was like, oh, Magnolia, Paul Thomas Anderson, you know, you're a genius. What next for the genius? And he said, an Adam Sandler film. And they all laughed at him.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. And the idea that those same people that laughed at him are probably waxing lyrical about Punch Drunk Love in the next press release for another film. I don't know, because there's no satisfaction to that.
Completely, man.
What a film, right?
Oh, completely. Yeah, I love that film so much. I think you're totally right about the extraction of the typical Adam Sandler character and plonking him in effectively to the real world. Whereas in his comedies, in like things like Big Daddy, he's kind of a part of that slapstick world. In this, he's just isolated. And then, like, I always remember the bit where he smashes the windows, always, because it's just horrifying.
Yeah.
And there's kind of a moment where you're like, should I be following this guy around? And then you very quickly warm to him again and realise that it's his circumstance and his sort of insufferable sisters who kind of incited this in him.
But they've worn him down, haven't they? I mean, most of his relationships seem to be people that have worn him down. Yeah, particularly his familial ones. There's that really quite horribly sad but hilarious scene where he starts talking to one of his husband's partners about seeing someone about his depression.
Oh yeah,
and he's like, I'm a dentist.
Yeah,
and it's just really funny. Like, but I think that's interesting. The idea that you said about taking him out of that sort of wacky world and then plonking him in the real world. Yeah, this is again a big stretch, but. It reminds me of the Frank Grimes episode of The Simpsons.
Yes,
you know, the whole point is that Frank Grimes is a real human being in the world of The Simpsons, and he's driven insane by it. And I just think there's interesting parallels there. This idea that Adam Sandler's character in Punch Drunk Love is just driven insane by the real quiet horror of life that can envelop you if you let it, or perhaps sometimes you're not even aware of it. I think you can just be someone that's a bit more susceptible to that, depending on your mental state or experience. But the way he is liberated from that by the love is, honestly, the scene where, spoilers, you haven't seen it, but him and his love interest meet in Hawaii, and it's that shot, and they run together, and it's all silhouetted against the backdrop of Hawaii through the windows. It honestly has me in tears every single time. And I just think it's lovely, and it matches so well with the idea that love is deserved, and it absolutely is. Completely. Not trite, and it's just absolutely lovely.
Yeah, man. Yeah, I feel like that is his relationship with Emily Watson's character, who in herself is fantastic in this film as well. I don't know why she's so good, because you really believe in that character, and you really believe that she's part of this world that previously he's battling against. And then all of a sudden she comes into his life, and like you say, he's made stronger by it. There's literally that line in it where he's like, I've got a love in my life, and it makes me stronger than anything you can ever imagine. He's talking to Philip Seymour Hoffman, isn't he?
Oh, he's also fantastic in it.
Brilliant, yeah. Paul Thomas Anderson's got a thing about mattresses.
Yeah.
Have you seen Licorice Pizza? Obviously?
Yeah.
It's the same thing.
Yeah. That's a motif I'd not considered, but yeah, I'm sort of connecting the dots now.
Yeah. No, you're very right. The way that film deals with love and relationships with family, definitely ties in with One Fine Morning. Maybe perhaps to a more subtle extent than the other 3 films that we've discussed, but it's definitely got its place in there. I can see where that connection was made.
Yeah, and it's also just an excuse to talk about it, because it's a real beauty of a movie, and can't get enough of it. I have to watch that film at least once a year, sometimes twice, because it's just such a special movie.
That's my only Criterion Blu-ray.
Well, it's a good place to start.
Yeah, definitely. Lovely cover.
Oh, beautiful, yeah.
Have you got it?
I do, yes.
Yeah.
I do. Looking at my shelf now for those who can't. Most of you listening have been to my house, so we get people that haven't listened, so you can imagine me looking lovingly at my shelf.
Yeah.
My partner has a go at me quite a lot for that. Georgia, she's always going, you stop looking at your Blu-ray shelf. Trying to ask me about, like, what bowls to get from Matalan, and I'm there going, it's pathetic, isn't it? I'm fucking, just as bad. So I reckon we can double team this next one.
Oh yeah.
Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind.
Oh. Yeah.
I think it's important to bring that film up in the context of particularly human messiness, love and relationships, because Kaufman's screenplay and Gondry's direction and the resulting performances from Kate Winslet and Jim Carrey sort of like take a blender to those themes. Just sort of char them up into this almost indecipherable, discordant mix of memory and emotion and the physical responses to those emotions. The way the film distills those emotional and physical responses and releases them throughout is just I think nothing short of genius, really. I mean, the use of the word genius is something I try and refrain from, because it's perhaps overused, but here it's absolutely deserved.
Best Gondry film in my opinion. I think.
And it's easily, I mean, picking a favourite Kaufman screenplay for me would be like, I mean, I don't have kids, but picking a favourite child.
Oh man, yeah.
Because I just think he's probably one of, if not the best American screenwriter ever.
Yeah, man.
He's certainly up there.
I think what ties it in a little bit to, I mean, this might be again a stretch, got to stab in the dark a little bit, but what ties into slightly with One Fine Morning is the way it sort of treats the idea of forgetting. So, and how important forgetting can be. And there's a scene in One Fine Morning where her father, who's suffering from quite a rare disease, one of which memory loss is kind of associated with, him remembering things is actually quite kind of causes him to get quite anxious. And so you kind of, in that moment, when I watched that moment, I remember thinking, oh, you got to stop thinking about it then. Like, the only way is to forget, unfortunately. If you want to be comfortable, you have to forget. And this film, Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind, kind of, I mean, the whole conceit of it is, if you were to boil it down to one line, it would be, if you were in a relationship that turned sour and you started remembering the good times, like, is that a healthy thing? And in this case, it does work because they reconcile and they start their relationship up again. But I always got the impression that it was doomed again. Yeah. There is that suggested element, isn't there? And I really like that point you're saying about sometimes it's better to forget. I think you could expand on that a little bit and talk about how, as much as it is better to forget, it's almost impossible to forget. Oh, man, yeah.
Because those formative, not necessarily formative, but those, well, yeah, I would say probably formative moments in your life that you share with other people, both good and bad, are the things that are going to stay with you, and they're going to create those wounds that are going to, sometimes they're going to pop open in your mind. Yeah. And again, the idea of, obviously memories are really, really important, but it's the response from those memories that is so central to this film. Because obviously the whole conceit of the film is this device that can remove memories. Yeah. So, which is particularly useful for both of the lead characters in this film, as they're a couple that are separated from each other. Yeah, yeah. But what this device can't do, so it can remove the memories, what it can't do is remove the emotions and impulses that come with those memories. Yes. And those feelings that come with those memories. Yeah, yeah. So it sort of speaks a lot to that idea that how memories loom over you, not just as things that you think about, in that sort of weird time when you're lying in bed.
Oh god,
and you
trying
just
to get
get
fucking
something,
sleep.
you're like, god, and that sort of anxiety, those pangs. You think, oh god.
Why did I say that thing when I was 12 or 14 in my drama class or something? Yeah. If I'd do it all differently if I had the knowledge now, that kind of thing.
But obviously that's going to happen, but it's also, it sculpts your emotional reactions, sometimes without you even thinking about the memory.
Oh man, yeah.
So you can respond to something that's virtually identical or even different to the memory that this response is associated with, but you might not even have be able to connect the dots until reflection, or if at all.
Yeah, exactly.
And I think that's what the film does so brilliantly, is about that, and that discordant narrative structure really plays to that idea that the memories are fragmented and choppy, and we sometimes take the bits we like the best because it makes us feel better, and it's a good self-defense mechanism. But those really hard memories and the times that we ourselves are arbiters of someone else's pain or our own pain, and as much as we want to forget them, they're going to be there.
Yep, exactly. Yeah. There's a bit, the bit that really strikes me is the bit where she whispers to him right the last ever memory he has before it disappears. She whispers to him, like, meet me in Montauk, and he does, right? And I guess that is kind of an illustration of, it's not a memory that brings him back there, it's an emotion. It's like a kind of an instinct. So and weirdly it reminds me of that bit in Memento where he's like, Sammy Jenkins, and you got to see Memento, I'm sure.
Oh yeah, fuck it, if you've not seen Memento, turn it off, don't.
And he, he's doing all these tests with him, and he's like, I wanted to see if he could, because he's like picking up all these blocks and one of them's electrified. He's like, I wanted to see if he would remember which one is electrified, not through memory but through instinct. And again, it's just another an excuse to talk about Memento. But just I love that idea that memory can be triggered by emotion. And
it's those emotions that sculpt who you are now, and sculpt your, as we said earlier, sculpt your attitudes in future relationships or situations. Love another wonderful movie. I think that's one of those films. I mean, I think Kaufman at that point was on a bit of a roll, wasn't he? I think that was when he sort of broke into, so they use the word mainstream, we say it a lot, perhaps we throw it around a little bit too much, but I think that's, for lack of a better term, that's when he was perhaps at his height, because since then he's struggled to get that appeal, which is fucking heartbreaking for me, and I'm sure tricky for yourself.
Yeah, man. Well, there's what did he do after that? He did Synecdoche, New York, right?
What film that is?
Yeah, and then I didn't mind. I'm thinking of Anything's too much either. I know we've talked. We've talked about Kaufman a little bit in the previous episode, but there's been a bit of a gradual slowdown on his appeal, which is a real shame, because I think he's got a lot more in him, actually.
Oh, 100%. Yeah, I think he's, that brain of his is just, there's so much gold in there.
Fascinating.
Yeah. I'm sort of oversimplifying him, really. But great writer, great director. In this case, writer, of course, of Eternal Sunshine. But, his personality, his anxieties, his observations shine in this film. And I think that's something, just sticking with him again for a little bit longer.
Of course, yeah.
What I find really great about his films is that he always finds the right directors to sort of carry his vision. It's like directors whose visual stylings or the way they approach films is almost in line with his screenplays. Yeah,
they're always quite irreverent, aren't they, the filmmakers? Like, got Spike Jonze and then Michel Gondry. Michel Gondry, the way he makes his films is so insanely creative. And it did just complement the screenplay so much. If they got, like, I don't know, Mark Forstraw to direct or something, it would be shit, honestly. It would have been an absolute write-off. But he knows how to pick him, doesn't he?
Yeah,
another film, interestingly, that employed usually a comic actor for more dramatic purposes, much like Punch Drunk Love. And he's quite similar. He's different in a lot of ways, but he's quite similar to Adam Sandler's character in Punch Drunk Love, in that he's very quiet, reserved, and lonely, and doesn't feel like he fits in.
It's a parallel I've not established in my mind, actually.
I think that's bizarre.
Yes.
Fab.
Sorry. No, it is fab. Why did you say fab ever?
I know, yeah.
Unless I want the ice lolly.
Fab.
Mum! Fab, Mum! Haven't got any. Fuck off. Mia Hansen Love.
Yes.
Embarrassingly, a filmmaker that I'd only seen little bits and pieces of beforehand. So, I've been trying to delve into a couple of movies for the sake of the discussion. One thing that really stuck out to me over watching a few of her films over the last few days, she often addresses formative moments in people's lives, but never explicitly.
Okay. Yeah.
So a more traditional approach would, from a more conventional narrative, or a director or a writer with a more conventional approach to narrative would meet these difficulties head on. So you have a lot of like films about relationships and stuff that the arguments are central. If you think about something like Blue Valentine, for example.
Yeah. Oh God. Yeah.
Again, I'm not shitting on Blue Valentine. I quite like it.
Yeah.
It's unafraid to tackle the brutality of a relationship.
Yeah, through moments as well. There's like specific moments. I imagine. I remember quite a lot of key scenes in that film.
Yeah. And I think obviously that speaks to the different stylings of different filmmakers and indeed, different cultures behind those filmmakers.
Yeah.
In the case of Hansen Love, it seems to be more of a focus in the spaces in between these formative moments.
Yeah.
And how these experiences sort of shape the way they interact with future difficulties, complexities. And it was particularly apparent for me in Goodbye First Love, a film she made in 2011, which is about a teenage romance.
Yeah, okay.
Not
seen it myself, actually.
It's good. I mean, I just watched it yesterday, actually. At first, I was quite cold to it compared to other movies, but it's one of those films that you sort of reflect on it for a long time, and you come out thinking, "Oh, that was actually great."
Yeah.
Which I kind of sort of love that process.
Oh man,
I love that process of sort of thinking, no, the Danny of an hour ago was completely fucking wrong.
Yeah.
I really like that.
It happened to me with Burn After Reading.
Oh yeah,
I thought it was awful, and then I got out of the cinema and I'm like, I want to watch that again.
Yeah.
It's strange. Sorry, go on.
No. So this teenage couple.
Yeah.
And it's just this romance, classic sort of teen romance. The guy's a bit older; he's at university, whereas the girl's a bit younger and she's still at school.
Okay.
So, but I think the contents of the French perspective, that is probably more acceptable than it would be in England.
Yeah,
I don't want to make sweeping statements
for any
of our French listeners, but I assume there's a bit more of a liberal approach to stuff like that.
I guess it depends on how the film handles that, if at all. If it doesn't acknowledge it that much, then I mean, the film's clearly about something else, and why does it matter? I mean, if she was 12, like fucking hell, okay, that's a bit weird. I imagine she's like at least emotionally mature enough.
Well, the interesting thing is, it's about this relationship and about the intensity of a teenage romance.
Okay.
And how these two people aren't really fully formed enough to commit to a romance.
Oh, mate. Okay.
So which is, I think, a very common theme for all of us. I think we've all had teenage romances, either with people or from afar.
Yeah.
We've all felt these intense feelings, and what the film does really well is that the boy's a bit aloof. He clearly cares about her, but he's obviously very much headstrong about what he wants to do.
Right, yeah.
And there's this trip. You talk about this idea you were saying before about romances that are doomed to sort of end.
Yeah.
He goes on a holiday. Well, not holiday. He goes travelling, to South America. And it breaks her heart. And, she ends up sort of obsessing over him, and then he sort of sends her letters and eventually sort of says, look, this isn't healthy. I'm sort of taking away the sort of beautiful dialogue, the beautifully French dialogue, by paraphrasing it, what he says, but he's just like, sack it off, love. It's nothing like that.
South America's nice.
Bit hot.
Yeah.
It's about her then, her journey and her growth.
Right.
Not only does she grow away from that relationship, but the relationship is like an anchor point for her as a person, and how it sort of informs her approach to romance, both intimacy and love relationships.
Oh man, okay. Yeah.
And she goes to university. I'm sort of spoiling the whole film here. I won't give too much more away. But she studies to be an architect. She ends up getting a relationship with someone else. But then this guy comes back into her life.
Oh right, okay.
And it's about how all of this cocktail of really potent emotions that sculpted a lot of your attitudes now come back.
Oh wow.
So it's really interesting. And again, it's about the spaces in between.
Yes.
And even when the film confronts you with the sort of the disagreements and the arguments shared between the couple, it's never sort of explosive.
Yeah.
In a way that, again, we talk about Sian France's Blue Valentine.
Yes.
Or I'm thinking The Notebook.
Right,
these are perhaps sort of,
big sweeping moments.
Yeah,
right.
yeah. And again, I'm not necessarily criticising them for that, but the spaces in between are really important because they show that development, they show that growth of the person, but they also show how those wounds are still present within that person.
Yeah,
and it's really interesting. I think it's a really interesting film to sort of segue into One Fine Morning because it's very similar. The way that she handles the sort of emotional depth without ever really addressing directly or head on the inciting incidents that generate the emotion.
Yeah,
within other films.
That's a lot more true to real life as well. That's what I mean. This has been said on the podcast and previously, but life isn't about big moments necessarily. It's about a slow eking of that. I mean, if I'm thinking about my first ever relationship, I can't pinpoint a time in which I knew it was doomed. Because it wasn't like that. It was basically a lot like the film. Like I went off to university. That's all that happened.
Yeah.
And I always thought, like looking back on it, I kind of thought like I'm really glad it happened because it enabled me to kind of develop and have a deeper understanding about like how you navigate love and relationships and stuff like that. And yeah, I'm forever grateful for it. But I can never pinpoint a time in which that feeling started. It was gradual. It was like a graph.
It's interesting, isn't it? Because people, they either view those teenage relationships, they have that ability to look at them and think, well, I was very young then, I wasn't the person I am now.
Yeah.
They can sort of look at it with a sense of wistfulness, but also sort of shake their head and go, oh,
Yeah.
That was a bit,
Without it though, you probably wouldn't be the person you are now.
Exactly, and then also, again, as you say, there are people that it really anchors in them, and it is a really big part of who they are, or indeed it sculpts a lot of how they interact with the world moving forward.
Completely. Yeah.
So it's interesting. One Fine Morning, then, as sort of alluded to in the intro, it's quite a sort of film that tackles a lot of really deep themes and ideas. But I think the key theme that threads them all together, I think, is the many faces of vulnerability.
Yeah, okay.
How we make ourselves vulnerable when we bare ourselves to others in the pursuit of physical and emotional connection.
Okay, yeah.
Or how our carefully constructed facades crumble when besieged by grief.
Yeah,
Yeah. So there's the different stages of vulnerability that come with those different things.
Yeah.
And the way that Hansen Love handles that, I mean, Sadu deserves a huge amount of credit for that as well because her performance is fantastic.
Yeah.
I don't know, I feel like that's where the film really hit me the most. The idea of being vulnerable to people and the different faces of vulnerability, I think, is a real key theme.
Oh, no, I agree. I feel like she's going through a lot, some positive things, and at least initially, but also a lot of pretty nasty, quite confrontational issues as well. But you can see different stages of that vulnerability, like when she's with this chap. I can't remember his name.
No.
But
me neither.
she tends to kind of wear her emotions on her sleeve a little bit more, as you do when you're with a loved one, or at least a loved one like who you feel like you can kind of share your thoughts and feelings with. And then there's a different vulnerability to her when she's with her family members and when she's kind of sorting her father's stuff out in the flat, and you can still tell it's there, again thanks to her performance, but it is very it's a lot more walled up, isn't it? It's a lot more kind of the idea of sort of fretting alone, and you can kind of see that she's feeling it in her chest, not on her face, right?
Yeah,
at least that was my reading of it.
No, that's interesting that it's sort of subdued enough to be almost in the background of the character.
Yeah.
The character's name is Clement.
Oh, there we go.
Or Clement.
Clement.
I don't know. Sorry, France.
She's what's she called? Fucking hell.
Sandra.
Easy.
Yeah. Nice English name.
Yeah, Sandra.
No, I think it's interesting. I particularly when focusing on the theme of vulnerability, you're probably going to hear that word quite a lot now.
No, yeah.
The idea that she seeks a romantic, initially very physical relationship with Clement.
Yeah.
Who is himself already in a relationship.
Yes. Yeah.
And I think the idea that there's a vulnerability there in the sense that she's making herself vulnerable to someone that is going to be unpredictable, on the basis that he's in a fucking relationship with someone else.
Yeah.
And it's a very French thing to do in films, to deal with an extramarital affair. I feel like every French filmmaker has to do it.
Yeah.
But what I particularly admire about it is that whilst the film doesn't necessarily shine him and bathe him in light as a faultless human being, he's a human being as well that's capable of his own mistakes and errors. And the film sheds light on the reasons for the affair. So from her perspective, she's a widow, and she's lost all interest in love and intimacy, and this gentleman's presence rouses that out of her, brings it back. And whatever he's lost in his relationship and his long-term relationship, rouses in him. But it creates a complexity, doesn't it? Because he's struggling to deal with the societal or probably the social ramifications of infidelity.
Oh, completely, yeah.
And that ends up making him, for the lack of a better term, a bit of a bastard to Léa Seydoux character in a way, because he's playing with a woman's feelings who are fucking shot to bits, not only by the passing of a previous lover, but also dealing with this situation with losing your father, and having to sort of paper over the cracks and take all of his memories and sort of dole them out amongst people that don't even know him. So that's what sort of I find really interesting about it, is that idea that vulnerability can really put you in really risky and dangerous positions. And sometimes you don't necessarily see that these things are going to be worse for you in the long run. I mean, spoilers, it doesn't. It ends up being quite nice for her in the end, which I think is good.
I feel
because the sensitivity and the nuance of her performance, it makes you fucking just want happiness for her, even at the expense of some other woman who's lost her husband of 10 years.
Very, definitely the reason why we don't see her. I feel like you don't want to become attached to this chap's wife.
No, well, it would throw it off, wouldn't it?
Completely, and it would also make it too dramatic. And I think that lack of, like you were saying earlier, the lack of pivotal points in which there's an eruption or an explosion of emotion, like it really does. Like, to have that blowout argument between him and his wife would just be too much, I feel.
It would. You're absolutely right. It would completely derail the film, wouldn't it?
Yeah, man. And also the idea that not everyone's perfect. There were moments when I thought, he's going to turn out to be horrendous. And that's going to be like a really. This is going to be a moment in this film in which you realise, like, how could you? But it never happens, and they end up together, and you end up thinking like, okay, shit. Well, sorry, spoilers. They end up together. But and you kind of think, well, okay, then he's not a complete twat.
No,
he's not. Yes, he's played with their emotions, but that's just a flaw of his. That's something that
he's not knowingly doing it, is it? I think he's prioritising his own emotions.
Oh, completely.
Which is a twatty thing to do. But I think it's in the context of this film that treats its characters with nuance. It makes sense, because I think we can all attest to a time when we've done that. Again, doesn't justify the behaviour that results from that necessarily.
No.
But I think the film isn't offering justifications. It's exploring the messiness that comes as a result of offering yourself to someone, or surrendering to your desires, or surrendering to your frustrations. And I think that's part of the reason why the film does it so effectively, without necessarily picking a side, which I don't think, again, like you said, it's definitely not Mia Hansen Love's style to do that. It's about that distant observation, because that generates the emotional connection to the themes and ideas of her films. So I completely agree with you. I think it would ruin the movie if it would, again, deal with these things in an upfront manner.
Completely. I was quite sort of surprised by the lack of dramatic moments. The last time that I can think of that happened was After Sun, actually. The last film I watched, where I was like, I don't know why that spoke to me so much, because I can't pinpoint an exact time, apart from maybe the last scene that it occurred, but somehow I'm invested. I'm not bored.
No.
I don't know how that's happened, because on paper this sounds like a boring film. Not being funny. I mean, maybe that's like very slightly reductive of me to say that, but I don't know how she got it financed.
Well, I think it's probably
previous work, maybe.
French.
I
sort of joked to you afterwards, didn't I? Like, when I watch a French film, it just makes me think, God, they're just so naturally predisposed to be cultured.
Yes,
and interested in things that For me, like, you know, you go to, every French house has got piles of books everywhere.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's just the way that the films, again, we talked about this, how like films sort of create an idea of a culture in your mind, but in every fucking French film I've ever seen, every person's house, even some person that like works at a post office, you know, not that people who work at the post office can't be sort of philosophers, but,
well read,
but at the end you go back to their house and there's just fucking piles of books everywhere and obscure art posters on the wall, and I think, fucking hell, we're literally not that far away from them, and they're just so, they seem so much more culturally advanced.
Completely. No, I don't know why that is. Maybe
but yeah, no, it's
less kebab shops, maybe.
Yeah.
More wine and less beer, I guess.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah.
Again, yeah, that's
interesting tangent. We're shitting on our own beautiful pastures.
Yes.
Carling, bathed pastures. No, I agree. I also think the way the film deals with mortality is excellent.
Very good.
And you talk about the idea, you mentioned that already, the responsibility that family can sometimes put on you very explicitly. Yeah. And in this situation, he has a sort of a disease that, you know, is just degrading his whole body, isn't it? It's sort of rotting him. He's just essentially a human being that's rotting away. Yeah. A person that was before, by all accounts, judging by the way that they sort of had backstory through the interactions of other characters, or indeed his house, is someone that's a larger-than-life character, a sort of professor of philosophy. Yeah. So his life has been about thinking. His job is about thinking deeply about the profound questions. And I think the way the film handles those profound questions is really brilliant, because on the one hand there's this clearly very intellectual approach to ideas of mortality and the decay of the mind, and she sort of embeds that sort of philosophical musing within the characters in a way that gives it sort of an earthy, lived-in nature. So it doesn't feel like too French, if you know what I mean. In a sense, this film going, what is life? Kafka said, you know. I mean, that's all good. Don't be wrong, I love that shit. I love it. But it's like the film does both of those things in a way, and they don't clash with each other. No. And I don't know how she did that in a narrative that's so subdued.
Yeah, no, it's brilliant. It just, the way that it kind of slowly reveals to you what he's going through, and how upsetting it must be to him to, you know, it's the equivalent of, you know, how about one day, every day, one of these Blu-rays goes, right? And at the end of it, there's no Blu-rays left. I don't know. I mean, that's a stupid. That's a weird.
I quite like the attempt there.
Comparison. Yeah. But I don't know. Yeah, just, you know,
you're losing a part of yourself, isn't that what you're saying? You're losing a part of your passions, the people that give your life meaning. Yeah, they're fading away.
Yeah. It is quite sad and quite tough to watch, and quite unique in the way it's presented as well. And it helps that there's no like scene that he kind of breaks down in tears and go like, "What's happening to me?" You know, there's none of that, because that would have been a really hammy way of explaining how upset he is. And it's more, you know, he kind of gets ferried across Paris, doesn't he, to various nursing homes before they find one that suits him that isn't too expensive. And it's more. There's a weird routine to it all, in which like the family kind of isn't, you know, they're expressing emotion not through being overtly upset, but just by being absolutely exhausted. You can tell they're just so ground down by this. That's not to say that there isn't love there.
No, but like if you're ground down, and you know, and another thing I find quite interesting about the film is the way, or the portrayal of this sort of degenerative neurological condition, is that the father attributes a lot of gratitude to people that aren't always there.
Yes,
so
that's right,
so you know, Lea Seydoux character, I've forgotten the name already.
Oh, Sandra,
thank you. Sandra. Sandra is, you know, she is present in his life and helping him through this difficulty as best she can, and he never really explicitly thanks her for it. And he obviously he can't, because his brain's not in that space to be able to do that.
No,
but it affects her.
Yeah.
You know, it affects her that she's not getting any of the acknowledgement from, not really even from family.
No.
That she, I mean, it's obviously, you know, the film doesn't necessarily explicitly say the rest of the family are disinterested, because they're obviously not. They're obviously as helpful as they can be. But by focusing on Lea Seydoux's character, there's that suggestion that she's the one that really does a lot of the heavy lifting and isn't getting a great deal of acknowledgement for that.
Yeah,
and and we'd all like to be those people that aren't motivated by acknowledgement, or not necessarily motivated, but some of our anxieties and fears are alleviated by that acknowledgement.
Yeah, I think so.
But I think we are we are like that, and I think she plays that, and of course he plays that brilliantly as well.
Yeah, really interesting. Yeah, just a very eye-opening and kind of touching way of looking at a situation like that, and very no one's a villain really, are they?
No.
He's not a villain. You feel acutely sorry for him, whereas at the same time you can kind of feel that frustration that she feels by him like basically thanking his sort of live-in partner.
His carer, who sort of is suggested there's a bit more going on there, which was a weird scene, but it sort of worked. Yeah, it was strange. Yeah,
great movie.
Really. Very, very good. Highly recommended.
Yeah, I feel like
Cineboys recommend.
Definitely, yeah, stamp of approval. Maybe I don't know. It's quite clear. It's quite difficult to sell it. If someone came out to me and say sell this film to me, what's it about? It'd be quite hard to get them to understand that it's quite a beneficial watch.
Yeah, you're right. But I think we need to get used to this idea. I'm getting a bit wanky, probably come across a bit wanky here, but not all films are going to be marketable to you.
No, yeah, exactly.
And I think if you open yourself up to experiences that aren't marketable to you, you might find
you find gems.
You find gems and films that might make you think more deeply about yourself and the way you think about the world and others and blah, 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 blah. But it's a film that you should check out. Obviously, you're entitled to dislike it. I'm not going to think less of you if you do. But if you do, you're a prick.
Yeah, definitely. Anyway, it's time for wind turbine research, Dan.
Yes. Any wind turbines in this film?
There is no wind turbines in this film. I don't think there's many in Paris in general. I did look it up. It doesn't look like there's many. It's in the teens.
Unbelievable.
So the largest wind turbine in the world is in Hawaii, USA. It stands 20 stories tall, and each blade is the length of a football field. There we go.
Fucking hell, that is big.
It is quite big, isn't it?
It is. Yeah. 90 yards.
Yeah.
Oh, there we go.
Sorry, I had to...
No, it's essential now. It's got to be done.
It is, yeah.
Well, on that...
Yes.
Outro.
Questing the cinematic void.
So there we have it. It's weird me saying it. So there we have it then. One fine morning, Mia Hansen Love. Interested to see what she does next. I'll be checking out her next work as well.
Yes, and again, we're not endorsed by Mubi, but I would say that I think there's about 4 or 5 of the other films on Mubi.
Ah, there you go.
Including the film she did last year, Bergman Island, which I haven't seen, but it's on the watch list for this weekend.
That sounds fascinating, that film. That I was looking at Mia Hansen Love on Wikipedia instead of going to sleep. It's 1:30 in the morning. What's Mia Hansen? Yeah. That sounds amazing. That's her first English language film, isn't it?
I believe so.
Yeah. Interesting. Yeah, I should give that a go.
Yeah, all available on Mubi. Check her out. So next week, blaxploitation.
Yes,
we think.
We think so. We've
sort of kept teasing this. It's a term I think we mentioned before, coined by dear Cineboy Alfie, who hopefully, or definitely, will be on to discuss that. And we really want to get to the nucleus of the popularity of these sort of blokey lads, footy, violence, stand up and fight, you motherfucker.
Yeah. Really unique brand of film. I don't know why so many of them got
Nuts
made.
Magazine approved, sweaty, weird movies, but an appeal, a real appeal for a quite a large period of our lives.
Yeah, definitely.
Lots of people I knew were like, "Oh, we've seen Football Factory."
Yeah,
it's well brutal, mate.
Yeah.
Oh, great. Yeah.
See Kidulthood, mate.
God, Kidulthood. Fucking hell, that's a blast.
Yeah, man. There was
my god,
that got passed around the playground. I swear to God.
Yeah.
It was like a DVD. That was just like, mate, watch this. It's great.
There's always got to be a sex scene by some bins. Yeah, I seem to remember. Is there one like that in Kidulthood? I don't know. Probably.
I think so. Yeah, there's definitely a teenage pregnancy in it. Anyway.
There we go.
Yeah, I think these films are often I remember in my local HMV, there was a big section of like boys' movies, so like men, movies for men, right? And you had like fucking all of that lot there.
Yeah.
But then always in amongst it all would be Fight Club, and that would really annoy me. So I'm like, you have missed the point of Fight. You've entirely missed the point of Fight Club.
And I think there's a lot of the just as a ridiculous segue, but a lot of the lasting appeal of Fight Club has come from that misinterpretation, I think.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. We'll discuss this more at some point, either next week or very very soon, if not anyway.
Indeed.
Yeah.
So bloxploitation, lads, breasts, footballs, guns, stand up and fight. Look forward to that.
Yes.
From three men that have barely seen any breasts or done much fighting. Actually.
No, yeah.
So look forward to that. If that doesn't happen, on the off chance that doesn't transpire, you have to deal with what we give you.
Yeah, man. Yeah, it'd be a surprise.
Indeed. So in the meantime, have a lovely week.
Yes.
And we'll be in your ears for the next one.
Yes, see you then.
Cheers. Bye-bye.